You do this, you know.
Do what?
You romanticize things.
I don't romanticize. No.
Michael, you cried at that tagline for a movie you made up.
He had no arms or legs. He couldn't see, hear, or speak. This is how we led a nation.
You made us out to be more than we were.
Maybe we were more than we were.
I don't know what you're getting so upset about. We had a fun fling a long time ago. It's a good memory.
Okay, all right. I gotta go.
Hello, beautiful soul family, and welcome to my side quest walk-on podcast series, Limerence in Pop Culture. I got a lot of hits on my episode about unrequited love / limerence, and it's such a big deal in my own life. It's been such a struggle for me, such a source of confusion and pain and rejection and disappointment, and really romantic love, my expectations of it, my unhealthy attachment to it. All of that stuff has been one of my biggest and most powerful addictions. It really ruled my life before I learned how to heal it, and I have so much more time, more energy, more just like resources to devote to other things now that I have really fully unpacked that wound and taught myself to see things differently. So because that episode or that video, if you haven't watched it, go check it out. Please and thank you. Also, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. I would love to hear from you in the comments. This is just like some free healing resources that I like to put out just to like pay it forward. So if you interact with this video, it boosts it in the algorithm and helps more people see it and helps me with my whole dealio. So thanks for that in advance. So it also got me thinking, like, there's so much to talk about with limerence. There's so much to unpack. I feel like I could do one of these limerence and pop culture videos like a week and have content for years. Like, there's just so many examples of it. And so it's portrayed like as the ideal of romantic love, and it's actually very damaging and detrimental, and like something that I think we all should stop writing stories about. So this week I mentioned it in my unrequited love / how to know if it's limerence video and episode, and so I want to just like expand on it a little bit. I feel like honestly I could talk about each of these pairings in their own separate video, but instead I'll keep it like as short as possible and cram it all into one and just touch on each of these romantic experiences and give you some background, give my take on it, and explain like armchair therapist these couples and explain what I think is up with them. So this week we're talking, or in this limerence in pop culture episode, we're covering The Office. The Office is one of my favorite TV shows. I've seen it a bajillion times. I've seen it so many times all the way through. I have certain episodes memorized. I have most episodes memorized. You know how like back in the day, I don't know if any of you are like old like me, but back in the day, if you would listen to your favorite CD, like if you would get one of the songs stuck in your head, you would then play in your brain what came next on the album. I'm like that with Office episodes. So like no shade to any of these characters. I was obsessed with the Jim and Pam love story when it was on TV, and yeah, I just think it's a great show. It's a beautiful critique on the American workplace. It's a beautiful ensemble cast. I think the storytelling is really nuanced and beautiful, and I think it's just fucking funny. And so no shade as I'm unpacking these things. It's just a really blatant example of limerence. And again, not to say anything against Jim and Pam, like sometimes limerence is realized, or like sometimes it does come to fruition, but we'll get more into that as I go. So the first example of limerence in The Office is between Michael and Jan. So let's talk about Michael Scott for a minute. Michael Scott is desperate for love.
What is it like being single? I like it. I like starting each day with a sense of possibility. And I'm optimistic because every day I get a little more desperate, and desperate situations yield the quickest results.
As so many of us are. He's desperate for attention. He's desperate for validation. He's desperate to be seen. He just wants to be loved and accepted. He just wants to be part of a group. Clearly, he's a very gifted salesman, and that led him to get promoted up the ladder at Dunder Mifflin. But he lacks the people skills and the self-awareness to really be a great leader, or to be a peer, like to be taken seriously as like a friend or a partner to the people he works with. And that's because of the lack of self-awareness, he does kind of have a childlike naivete or an immaturity. He's very emotionally immature. He takes things that are not personal extremely personally. He makes fun of everyone, but he can't stand to be made fun of himself. And I think most of all is his fixation on partnership.
This is an old adage, but they say that when you find true love, you know within the first 24 hours. With Carol, I knew within the first 24 minutes of the second day I met her.
He falls in love hard. He falls in love fast. He may not even like the person that he thinks he's in love with. For example, when he proposed to Carol on like their 5th date or something, he wanted her to go to Sandals, Jamaica with him instead of spending time with her kids at Christmas. He also photoshopped a picture of himself over her ex and the father of her children. So like a lot of weird moves taking place here. And in the end, like he didn't even like her that much. It happens again with Jan on this on again, off again thing they have. You know, they make out because they're both drunk one night after hanging out at Chili's, which is the world's greatest aphrodisiac.
I feel God in this Chili's tonight.
And she's going through a divorce, and she repeatedly tells him, she makes her needs and wants and expectations known. She clearly defines the relationship. You know, I know Jan kind of unravels, but at first she's like a very professional, together, grown woman. She does lose it after a certain point, and someone, you know, you could suggest that her giving into Michael's advances and becoming his girlfriend was like a sign of her unraveling.
I am taking a calculated risk. What's the upside? I overcome my nausea, fall deeply in love, babies, normalcy, no more self-loathing. Downside, I date Michael Scott publicly and collapse in on myself like a dying star.
Whatever the case, they have their little encounter. She sort of breaks things off and ends things repeatedly, even though he keeps bringing it up. He keeps pushing the boundary. He keeps obsessing. You know, on the performance review day, he like calls everyone in to analyze this voicemail she left him looking for signs.
Michael, it's Jan. I guess I missed you. I guess I missed you. I guess I missed you. I guess I missed you.
Like that is a big thing that happens in limerence. Like you can't just, even if the person, this happened to me, even if the person is just like, I do not like you. I don't feel the same way about you as you do about me. And it's never going to happen. Like you can't hear that. You're still like, oh, this person's just running from me. Or like, I don't get it. They say one thing and they do another. What do they mean? What could this possibly mean? And it's like, well, it means exactly what they said. They don't want a relationship with you. But your limerent brain cannot handle that. Like it just, the illusion, the hope, the obsession is too strong. And Eventually, Michael is able to wear Jan down, but it's like, is that even, he doesn't even like her. She's mean to him. She abuses him. She wasn't ever the right person for him. She always was exasperated by him. She was always a little bit annoyed. She never took him seriously. Right from the jump, she couldn't even compliment him on being a nice person without insulting him and his entire personality. You know, like they clearly weren't compatible or meant to be, but because she was just like around, she was just like a warm body for him to fixate on, he becomes limerent on her. When it comes to fruition, and I'll talk about this with all the couples, the limerence dies out. And this happens even in real life couples who like manage to overcome the odds, if you want to use really limerent romantic language, and find their way to each other. The limerence goes away and it becomes just an everyday relationship. And for some people, that's enough to like get bored and hit the road and be like, or to become limerent of someone outside of that relationship if it really is like a compulsion or an addiction. But in Michael and Jan's case, it ends up being like his worst nightmare. He ends up having to restructure his whole life. She continues hurting them long after they broke up because she gets pregnant. She didn't want to have kids with him, but she gets pregnant soon after they break up and has a baby and decides to raise them on their own. And she said that she wouldn't have done it with Michael because she couldn't take him seriously as a father or as like even a co-parent, not even in a relationship. And so it was pretty mean, you know, all manner of like obsession, of limerent thinking, of anything good, like even any of the fantasies that he was engaging in when he was longing for Jan, longing for her attention, longing for reciprocation, which are all symptoms of limerent or like limerent behavior or signs of limerence. All of that's gone, and it just becomes about maintaining the relationship, keeping the person around, and surviving day to day because it was such a miserable experience. Speaking of Michael, there is his like long-term sort of forever person, Holly, who he becomes limerent on. Now, let's talk about Holly for a second. So they meet, they instantly click, they hit it off, they do a little dance around each other, and there's a little bit of miscommunication before they finally make it happen and become a partnership. They fall in love, and then because of David Wallace being an asshole, she gets transferred to Nashua. They break up because they haven't been dating that long, and she thinks like it's not worth it, it's not going to be sustainable, and he's devastated because he feels like this is the love of his life. Then they spend a significant amount of time apart, years before she ends up getting transferred back, and he stays hooked on her. He stays limerent on her. He moves on, he dates around, he like tries a few things, but he never stops thinking of or loving Holly. Obviously, this is incredibly romantic and like very Michael Scott, you know? They did seem to be super compatible. They did seem to have a strong connection, but a pretty good sign that you're in limerence and not in love is the lack of reciprocity. She didn't do a long distance relationship with Michael, but she did do one with AJ. Now, in her defense, that's because they had been together a lot longer than she and Michael had, and so there was a stronger foundation there. But Michael should have seen, first of all, he should have actually moved on. You know, there's no reason to hang on to a relationship after it ends when so much is in the way of it. Even if it was a beautiful experience, even if it was a wonderful connection, like there's no reason not to move on, aside from storytelling, not to move on and go about your business, you know, create a new partnership, like find love elsewhere. Realize if I found it once, I can find it again. You don't have to be fixated on that one person and hold on to that one person. And he did, and it did work out for him. But again, once he and Holly ended up together, then it became about logistics. Then it became about the relationship. Then it became about her elderly parents and moving life and figuring out all that stuff, having kids, having his family plan. So the limerent part, this like cosmic romantic love part, gave way to the monotony of maintaining a relationship. And I don't think that like Michael's fixation on Holly is the most toxic form of limerence in pop culture I've ever seen. But when he saw she was in a relationship, that should have been a sign to move on. Like if you're in love with someone who's in a relationship, the best thing you can do for yourself is move on. Like, don't go after people who are already in relationships unless that relationship is open. And then you have to make sure you're down to be in an open relationship and be prepared for any shape that might take, and the fact that you might not be number one priority to this person, and things get complicated. But if someone is in a closed monogamous relationship and you think they're your soulmate, they're probably not. Like, you should put on the top of your list, like, when I am looking for a partner who, number one, is available, like bottom of the barrel, bare minimum, number 1 point is available for me. And if they're not, leave it alone. Put them in a friendship place. If you're not capable of doing that for whatever reason, then you might need some distance, and that's okay. It's not silly. It's not selfish. It's not immature. In fact, it's mature and respectful and loving to everyone involved, including yourself, to do what you got to do to have appropriate feelings for that person. But there is the scene where Pam and Michael go on the road together, where she's, they end up visiting Nashua and Holly's not there, and she finds the letter on her computer. First of all, huge invasion of privacy, like huge. He finds out that Holly's in a relationship. He's mean to Holly's boyfriend. At some point, he gets confronted with this notion that, like, maybe this is in your head. Like, maybe this isn't real. You do have a tendency to kind of romanticize your relationships and make them seem better in your head than they are in real life, or at least make them seem more, like more significant, more romantic, whatever. And he goes through a crisis where he has this realization about himself. And then he's like, is that true? Do I do that? I don't know. Maybe I do. And so, this is the herpes episode. And he goes and reconnects with all of his exes. And the battery is dying. So Michael has this existential crisis of like, do I make too big a deal out of my romantic connections? Is this a problem I should be looking at? And so he goes and reconnects with all of his exes, and it turns out that Holly is this big special one, that is the only one he didn't romanticize. And so he sets his sights on rekindling the romance, and it does end up working out. It turns out that Holly's partner didn't really want to commit to her fully, and that Michael really was what she was looking for, and she never got over him, and blah, blah, blah. So it does come to fruition, which I feel like most limerent relationships don't. But as I said before, it did settle into a kind of mundane, normal relationship existence that did end up working out because they did have a strong friendship, they did have a strong connection, and it really was just circumstance getting in the way. But is it healthy to hold on to someone, to hold on to that hope, to not let yourself fully move on for several years? No. And it is good storytelling, but it's not that realistic. The next couple I want to talk about is the Jim towards Pam Limerence. So this is another very similar situation. The Office is no stranger to recycling a romantic subplot, but Jim has been in love with Pam when the show opens for several years. She had the whole time since high school has been engaged to Roy, who's a total dirtbag. And her and Jim have a really special connection. They're like best friends. They make each other laugh. They get each other's sense of humor and personality. He listens to her. And really the big thing in the way is Pam's resistance to change and moving forward and taking a chance. To the point where when Jim reveals his feelings to her, she seems like totally unaware that she reciprocates those feelings, point blank. And she turns him down. And anytime he tries to like hint at or suggest that there might be more going on than just a platonic friendship, she gets a little bent out of shape. And it's some of the only times we see her being like harsh to him is when he tries to push the relationship further.
Some might even say we had our first date last night.
Oh, really?
Really?
Why might some say that?
Because there was dinner by candlelight. Mm-hmm. Dinner and a show, if you include Michael's movie. And there was dancing and fireworks. Pretty good date.
We didn't dance.
You're right, we didn't dance. It was more like swaying. But still romantic.
Swaying isn't dancing.
He does eventually come to the conclusion after he makes his feelings explicit and she turns him down. He does make an attempt to move on. He leaves, he gets a promotion and goes elsewhere, and he starts forming a relationship with Karen, who, similar to Pam, he has good chemistry with. They have a good connection. They get each other's sense of humor. She's a bit more serious, a bit more strong. Like, she's a lot stronger than Pam, I would say. She has better boundaries. She doesn't take any shit. And she also pushes Jim. Pushes. Did I say pushes? Pushes Jim to grow. She gets rid of that weird helmet hair. She has him dressing better. And she is a source of growth for him. However, this is a thing that happens in limerent relationships. When you're limerent on one person, it can stop you from truly giving yourself to anyone else who might come along. So while you may engage in a relationship of a romantic sort with someone new, though you may like them or even fall in love with them, if you're still stuck on the person you were limerent on, if you haven't really worked through those feelings, if you haven't learned to call it what it is, if you haven't unpacked what happened, then you might be holding out a little bit of hope that they'll come back, that you'll come back to them, or you might always be comparing. And the thing about limerence is it's so rooted in fantasy and so rooted in unreality that nothing real compares. Like, you control in your head when you're fantasizing about the person you're limerent on, you control the relationship. You can mold them and make them into any kind of partner you want or need. You can design them to be perfect. It's like a sim game, But that's not the reality of who they are. So when you meet someone who's real, who really wants to love you, who you love, but that doesn't meet the version in your head of the person you're limerent on, it can seem like it pales in comparison, and it can feel like this is great, but it doesn't compare to that love, or like this is great, but it isn't the same. It doesn't like light me up the way that one does. It doesn't rule my life. It doesn't threaten to destroy the very fabric of my being. And it's important to know that the reason why it doesn't compare is because it's up against a fantasy. It's up against a Disney movie. It's not up against a real thing. That's not to say that Jim and Pam's connection wasn't special. Clearly it was. They, like Holly and Michael, did find their way back to each other. But I don't think that Karen was the terrible match for Jim that a lot of people think she is.
No way.
What a horrible, horrible movie that was.
And now we get to remember it forever.
Thank you.
Thank you.
She kind of puts my head in your ear.
I think that she really loved him. She wanted him to take her seriously, and he couldn't. Not because he and Pam were like this destined soulmate type of situation, but because he hadn't fully moved on. And to enter into a new relationship before he moved on for real wasn't really kind to Karen. It wasn't really kind to Pam. And it really wasn't being honest with himself about where he was and what he was and was not ready for. And that's something we all do. You know, he's not a bad dude for doing that. He is a bad dude for bullying Dwight, but that's beside the point. It's important to, you know, to not stay stuck in the fantasy, to like call it what it is, and to not really hold up these types of relationship as your standard, as your like the baseline for your expectations. Because really, if Jim had gotten into therapy when he left Scranton, if he had asked himself, why was I, you know, there was that one point where he is talking about someone. I can't remember who. Maybe it was Andy when he was with Angela. And he was like, I don't really see what he gets out of that relationship. Meanwhile, not looking in the mirror and figuring out like why he gives to Pam so unabashedly, you know, why he's just her emotional affair, her emotional labor, her support, her emotional support fucking animal at work, like why he gives so much and asks so little, to the point where Roy at one point thanks him for being that person for his partner so he doesn't have to listen to her complain at the end of the day. It's just like, baby boy Jim, we need a therapist stat, because A, just like Michael and Holly, you're stuck on someone who's in a relationship, a committed relationship. B, what does she give you back besides like a few laughs and goes along with your pranks? Like, it's not like she knew what was going on in his life. It's not like it was reciprocal. And also, like, if he was honest with himself, if the feeling wasn't like, what was he going to do? Just like keep being in love with her even after she got married? Just not a good look, not a good situation. And vice versa, when the roles are reversed, you know, he and Pam kind of long for each other in this limerent purgatory when he's away, where he misses her, she misses him. They have that cute phone call where they're like, oh, we still got it. We still got that connection. You know, we can still make each other laugh. And it's real cute and everything, but like he's trying to move on with his life. He's like slowly developing feelings for Karen in this like mature, stable relationship where both people are available and both people are ready to do it, you know? And she's putting her life together after being with one abusive shitbag for her whole life, like since high school. So she's trying to like experience and get out there and learn who she is and take art classes, but they're both longing for the past. They're both longing for a return of something that was there, but not in the right capacity, and then left. And you can see, like, if Pam was your friend and Jim came back and he had this girlfriend that was cool and pretty and fun and you liked her, and you also feel like, well, that was kind of like, this is kind of my thing to live with because I did turn him down after all, too little too late on the whole dumping Roy thing. If you were her friend, you'd be like, maybe you should keep your distance. Like, maybe you should try to keep your feelings in check. Maybe you should continue dating. Maybe you shouldn't do your weird little pranks with him. Like, maybe it's time to move on from this. Maybe it was a missed opportunity and that's okay. And likewise, if you were Jim's friend, you'd be like, I know you're stuck on Pam, but like Karen's great. Like, too little too late. The water has gone under the bridge and other cliches. It's like, maybe this isn't meant to be, you know, maybe you should hashtag love the one you're with. It does work out because it's a fictional show and they need to tie up loose ends. And also everyone would have been pissed if they didn't end up together. But just like with Michael and Holly, what happens when they finally do make it a thing, when they crush Karen's spirit, when they overcome the odds and they make it official, it settles into a real world, sometimes monotonous. You know, the writers almost made Jim cheat on Pam. They ended up in marriage counseling. Like, it wasn't always this cosmic heavy, longing type of love, because when it comes to fruition, when on the rare occasion that the people involved do fall in love with each other and like make it happen, consummate it or whatever, it becomes just a regular old everyday relationship that requires maintenance and communication, where there's times where you're out of sync, where there's times where you fight, where you don't like each other very much, where you wonder if it's worth it. And where you might be tempted, if, like I said before, if limerence is like an issue for you, if this is a way that you like to distract yourself from your own wounds and make yourself available but unavailable, there is a temptation to become limerent on someone outside of the relationship. And that's why it's important to check. And that's why it's important to know that just because you get your fairy tale ending doesn't mean it's always going to be a fairy tale. Relationships are sometimes dull. Sometimes the work feels tedious, sometimes it's having the same conversation about the same issue. Sometimes it's giving each other reassurance. Sometimes it's taking care of someone when they're sick. It's not always going to be this fantasy. And that's really the danger of limerence, even when both people love each other, even if it's like some surmountable thing that's keeping you apart. When you do come together, don't be disappointed when that person that you have on that pedestal ends up coming right down to earth. That reminds me of Kathy's limerence on Jim. She's obsessed with him. She becomes convinced that he's unhappy in his marriage. She becomes convinced that he is dying to sleep with her, that he can't wait to cheat on his wife. She just assumes that the feelings are reciprocal, and it turns out they're not. And she gets embarrassed and has to quit her job. Along the same lines, separate but different but same, is the Ryan Kelly Ryan limerence. So Ryan is kind of like your standard narcissistic millennial, queering heterosexuality man, where he only really wants Kelly when she's unavailable. When she is with someone else or fixated on someone else, he can't stand it. It burns him alive, and he becomes like the most romantic person on the planet and love bombs the hell out of her until she comes back to him.
Hey, what's the deal with this guy? He's really into Kelly, huh?
Yeah, they're really great together.
Makes me wonder if I made a mistake.
No. Come on, I think you guys are both happier now, right? You're single, plenty of girls to date, right?
Yeah. Maybe we weren't right together, but it's weird. I'd rather she be alone than with somebody. Is that love?
That's about it, yeah.
But when she's chasing him, he's totally ambivalent, totally uninterested, and just kind of uses her for attention, affection, to feel like he's something special, when he has no intention of, culminating that relationship in the outcome that she so clearly wants from the start, which is marriage and kids.
And do you know when you would want to get married?
Actually, I don't see ever getting married.
Oh.
Ryan, you should be more sensitive. It's obvious she likes you, and comments like that, they just...
I know what I said.
So these two go back and forth. If you took this relationship out of the context of a workplace comedy mockumentary and you put them in the right setting, it would be like romance novel fat material. People would be all over it. They'd be like, from Ryan to Kelly.
Is that supposed to impress me? No, not gonna happen. He has hurt me too much and too often, and I am in a healthy relationship now. So I'm not gonna flaunt it, I'm not gonna hurt him, but that door is closed. What are we doing? This is so wrong. This can't happen again.
This has to happen again. Daryl can't happen again.
There'd be fan fiction. Because they have all the hallmarks of these on-again, off-again rom-com or romantic drama, like The Notebook or, even when Harry met Sally, you know, they have one of those types of relationships where they have this like hot passion. They are seemingly obsessed with each other. The relationship does seem bigger than circumstance, bigger than conflict, bigger than other partners, bigger than distance. They can't seem to shake one another. And while a less healthy version of me would say that's because they're meant to be, because they're soulmates, because who in the world deserves either of them except for each other? Why would they inflict that on anybody else? Me now knows, that was like a Kevin sentence, me now know that it's because they were limerent on each other. And, you know, Kelly loves the drama. Kelly's seen way too many rom-coms. Kelly is in a romance novel in her head.
Didn't you two date for like a long time?
This is like a fairy tale.
You know, it's love at first sight with Ryan. They make out on February 13th. She sees all the signs and synchronicities that suggest they're supposed to be together. And yet he doesn't notice any of this. When they made out before Valentine's Day, it was his mistake and he regretted it. And even though they got married at one point, like it's just a shit show from start to finish. And everyone on The Office becomes totally exasperated with this relationship and can't wait for it to end because it's driving all of them bananas. They hate seeing Kelly hurt. They hate seeing Ryan have so much power, and they just want it to be over. And I think that's how a lot of people who have friends who are limerent on someone feel. It's just like, I'm so sick of hearing about this person. I'm so sick of having to like analyze every text they send and having you run down every conversation you have with this person. Like, I would really just like my friend back. I would really like you to be with someone who wants to be with you, who loves you, who cares about you. I just like, can we please get over this? And that's how Kelly's family feels. That's how all of their coworkers feel. And still, in the end, after having not seen each other for a while, Ryan comes back in right at the last second with his baby Drake, and he and Kelly run off into the sunset. She's been with this good man, this doctor who loves her, who doesn't mind her like vapidity or high drama, and they just dip and start their crazy life together. Looking at all of these characters, like, all of them have the makings of someone who would be limerent. Michael has issues with his mother. He has, you know, he had no father figure. He was bullied in school. He hasn't really had many like strong friendships or connections. He's very inexperienced as far as relationships are concerned, and has probably spent a lot of time in a fantasy land, which is evident by like his actions, his expectations, the way he tries to run from his problems. He's just not a very grounded, stable force. And that sets him up for these types of relationships that aren't grounded in reality. It sets him up as a chaser. It sets him up as a people pleaser. And that's how he ends up in so many situations like this. And this is why he romanticizes all of his partners. He's not dealing with reality much of the time. Pam has kind of a tough mom. We don't know a lot about Jim, but we know that Jim's brothers bully him. Jim seems like, you know, a guy that got handsome like way too late, so he doesn't realize how handsome he is. Pam is afraid of change. She's been with the same high school boyfriend, so there's some like fear of being alone, some fear of the new, some resistance to change, which comes up for her over and over again. And while Jim is a stable force, while he's not totally afraid of change, he is loyal to a fault. And he puts himself, you know, the character is a Libra. He puts himself in harm's way in order to be of service to others. So that checks out. We don't know about Holly, but she isn't as limerent. She seems pretty grounded and pretty stable. She isn't as limerent on Michael as he is on her, although she did have a hard time saying goodbye, but she did it when she felt like it was the right thing to do. Just like she laid her boundary with AJ and was like, if you're not going to propose, I'm ready to dip because I want to be taken seriously as a partner. Ryan and Kelly, it's like, who knows? We know that his mom is a little overbearing and like, he's the golden child. And we know that Kelly has been high drama from the start. So like all of these people have issues with reconciling their behavior and their acceptance of reality, of this challenging issues at hand, of facing the facts of their life. They resist what's good for them. They have a tendency to self-sabotage. And these relationships that they're stuck on are bad for them. They make them unhappy. And even the ones that come to fruition, I guess all three of these do, when they come to fruition, it isn't always what they expected. And some of them react well to that. Some of them react poorly to that. Ryan and Kelly will probably always be tumultuous. But maybe that's how it's supposed to be. But I think it's important in these pop culture, Limerence and pop culture videos, just to talk about this, just to talk about the characters' patterns and to point out how prevalent Limerence is depicted and shown as the highest manifestation of romantic love. Because in fact, having that expectation, having that belief, having that misconception can sabotage real, true, stable, reciprocal relationships in favor of the more chaotic, less reciprocal ones. And that's all I'm trying to do here, is just show people the light about limerence, because learning that word, learning that concept, and like retraining my brain to understand what real love is has been deeply healing. And yeah, that's all I got for today. Stay tuned for another one of these episodes, webisodes, side quests to the podcast. All the links to all my information will be down below. If you're having issues with limerence, if you find yourself in these kinds of relationships over and over again, if you would like to start your healing journey but you don't know where or how, you can click the link in the description to take my self-love course. It's a 30-day journal-centered course where I provide prompts, journal challenges, letter writing exercises, self-love and self-care ritual work, guided meditations. I do a tarot reading for you at the beginning and at the end. We set an intention, and it's all about discovering yourself, facing your fears of being alone, getting to know yourself, getting to love yourself, acquainting yourself with boundaries, and choosing you. So if that sounds like something you'd be into, you can click the link in the description to sign up. And yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you for doing the work. Happy healing. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Kapoor and Kadesperate he watches.
Second line.
He is a drifter out to sea.
And when the Indian Ocean calms, one speck of white remains in waters cold and Kelly green.
It's just so dumb. But when he describes himself as a child, lost on a light raft.
Ryan can never know.